I'm Richard and welcome to Zpeaktures Productions. Today's video is about Susvara versus amplifiers. And on the table here are some amplifiers I have. All of them are owned by me. No biasness to any sponsors here. But of course, I have personal preferences. And today I just want to rate those amplifiers based on my listening experience across 3 different songs. And I will of course use the Susvara, right? And then I will see which amplifier does the best, at least to me. Now, before I start, I'd like to thank AV1 for providing me this copy of the Susvara. I enjoy it, and I think not many of us have the luxury to own the Susvara and the Abyss 1266 together. Well, thanks to them, they loaned this copy to me, and I have both now to utilize and do one of these videos, and I'll also do another comparison video between these and the Abyss 1266. Do visit them at Adelphi or in the description below, and thank them a lot for this opportunity to use the Susvara. But that said, I have amplifiers on the table here, and I want to know which amplifier power the Susvara best. Now, why did I do this video is because a lot of people say Susvara is very picky, requires special amplification. Well, now first, Susvara is hard to power, and that's the truth because it is very insensitive at 83 dB per milliwatt, and it has 60 ohms of impedance, one of the higher impedance for a headphone. At least for a planar magnetic headphone. Most planar magnetics are lower than 60. But that said, if you look at it, how we listen to music, most of us listen at 75, 70, 80 dB or even 85 dB. Then in dynamic range, we will rarely listen to music above 105 decibels, right? And if you put all of that in perspective, you don't really need more than maybe 200 milliwatts, or I think 200 something milliwatts. At 105 decibel, I remember, based on the calculator, this guy only needs 150 something milliwatt of power. That is a power that many amps can produce. However, amps produce power at, I would say, different quality. And based on the loading, it also have different characteristics and quality itself. You can go ASR and Superbass, I think Superbass Audio Friends or something, and then take a look at measurements. I'm not going to talk about Objectify here. But yes, amplifiers do not always produce the same amplification at the same quality. That's something you must note. So that being said, all the amplifiers here produce easily 500 milliwatts and above of power for this headphone itself. So which of the amplifiers sound the best? Now, let's look at the amplifiers. And interestingly, I have very different topologies and even different type of amplifier on the table here. All these are owned by me, as I said, So let's go through them one by one. First is the Ferrum OOR. This is a Class AB amplifier. It has a power unit called a HIPSO, and then the OOR unit on top. Together, you buy as one stack, or you can buy the amplifier alone. Most of us do buy as a stack, but some people do say that the OOR with a switching power supply is actually pretty okay. So it really depends on you. Now, this guy produces a lot of power. I believe 8 watts of power at 60 ohms, so more than enough to drive the Susvara. As I said, this guy probably only needs like what? Few hundred milliwatts at most, right? And then the next one is the MKH 200 from Macintosh. This is a tube-based amplifier. Let me put this Susvara in front here. I love this amplifier because it has interesting sound quality. It is like a solid state at a tube, and then somewhere in between, but all the goodness of it. I really love it. I have a review on this amplifier itself, but I will not go too in-depth into this. Just note that this produces 500 milliwatt at different type of impedance. You can actually turn the knob in front to control the impedance rating, and then therefore output 500 milliwatt in those impedance itself. It's very flexible of a headphone, and it does pretty well. It does really, really pretty well. I love it a lot. And then there is the emblem here. Now, this emblem is unique. This is a current-based amplifier, and it does current output, not voltage output. It does also have a voltage port, but in this particular review here, I will use mainly the current output because for planar magnetics, current output works very well. Current output works very well for headphones with very flat, response to the power itself, and this amp works very well with planars, and this amp doesn't work with Focal Utopia for current mode. Do not use the current mode with Focal Utopia. It sounds weird. Okay, but that's a story for another day. So the next one will be the Toping amp here. This is the Toping A70 Pro. This is one of the cheapest amplifier on the table here, and in fact, one of the cheapest high power amplifier you can buy. This amplifier outputs 6 watt to 64 ohms. More than enough to ever run a Susvara, and it measures perfectly well. I will not go too in-depth with it, but It's a very impressive amplifier considering the cost. In some countries, less than 500 USD. In Singapore, it's about 700 to 800 Sing dollars, depending on where you get it. And lastly, this is the GSX Mini. This is a Class A amplifier. And this outputs, I believe, 6 watt to, I think, 30 ohms. Or is it 24 ohms? So, if you count up to 60 ohms, this should easily produce 2-3 watts of power still. Now, with that out of the way, all the amplifiers here have very different characteristics, and I want to share with you my finding in this video. And most importantly, they are all to power the Susvara. So let's go through them one by one. I will start from the lowest rating to the highest rating, and the songs I use will be these 3 songs on the screen here. Now, I know some of you guys will be saying, hey, I'm using some weird ass song to review, but I mean, this is the audio hobby, man. You listen to whatever you like. So for me, I listen to what I like, and they are YOASOBI, Edo, and of course, a soundtrack from Final Fantasy, Ultima. And they represent different types of soundtrack, where Ultima is the orchestra piece-like, YOASOBI is very modern pop, and then Edo is somewhere in, like, I'll say as rock, metal type of song, at least for this Unravel itself. But yes, I love all of these 3 songs, and I use them to review the units here. I can just tell you that the characteristics from song to song is quite consistent, and how I test them is not sequential. So some songs I start with Ferrum, some songs I start with MKH, and then there's another song I start with the GSX. So it depends, and I just try to mix it up so that I can compare it and check whether if my findings are consistent song to song. But let's not waste time. I will actually read the points from my handphone because it's just too much information. I can't remember it off the bat. So let's talk about this. Now, the parameters I'll be using will be based on what you see on the screen here. And there are some parameters. There are details, so how much small little things you can hear. And then separation and positioning, about how separate the instruments are, the positioning of those instruments. Can you actually make sense of them? Or is it just one blob? And then there are vocals, because I love vocals, as you can see. I love vocals, so that's important to me. Then soundstage, how big the sound actually sounds. Now, Susvara is a big sounding headphone. Another video for that. But different amps do make it sound slightly different, and I like to share you my findings. And then there is tonality. Do I feel it's natural? Do I feel it is weird? And then there's effortlessness, because all these are amplifiers and we are talking about power Susvara. Does it sound strained? Does it sound too laid back? Is it effortless, right? Or is it like pulling the Susvara around? That's something I want to share too. And then I'll talk about bass, because bass is something that a lot of us enjoy and it's essential to make a lot of the music sound great. And interestingly, especially when you enter into the lower bass, the sub-bass area, many amps cannot actually produce good amount of sub-bass in headphones, at least those I tried. But some of these amps here do, and I want to share with you my findings on that too. And lastly, it's about enjoyment. Do I enjoy the sound? Now, this is super subjective. I'll say this is the biasness part of things, right? Now, let's not waste time. Let's talk about it one by one. Now, I'll start with the lowest point one first. I'll just flash the score on the screen and talk about the amplifier on general, how I feel about it when I listen to the songs with it. So the lowest score is actually the GSX Mini. Now, the GSX Mini, the biggest problem with it is that the details is quite limited. At least when powering the Susvara, it feels like a lot of things get lost in the mix, especially in the mids region or in the mids-high region. Now, the bass is there, but it feels very non-texture, very, I'll say rounded, or even muddy at times. I don't know how do I want to really describe it, but that's really how I do it. And because of these things, of everything getting mishmashed together, especially in songs like Edo's Unravel, where she starts screaming and then the bass come in, the small little instruments, or when I listen to Ultima, when they chan, then after that they start, bass come in, bells come in, instruments come in, bass horn, everything gets lost in the mix. And the GSX Mini do not provide that kind of clarity, that kind of separation, and that kind of details for the Susvara. So it actually gets the lowest point of 27. But I do enjoy it. As I can see, I give a 4-point enjoyment. That's the biasness part. And that's because if you don't care about the technicality, you just want a smooth experience that is not distracting, the GSX Mini do give you that. That's the important part. Now, the next one that I will talk about in second last place is the A70 Pro, as you can see in the points here. Now, the A70 Pro is a very technically competent amplifier. Outright, any of the tracks, and it's the only amplifier that does it. When you first on the track, it sounds black. Like black. It looks like when you start, especially for Ado's Unravel, she starts with a very solo singing, a very whimsical kind of singing when she starts off the Unravel. It sounds like she's singing in darkness, in blackness, in a black hole. It's really a nice experience. And then when you start Ultima, when the chant comes in, the chant is like somebody is chanting in a hall and there is absolute silence. A70 Pro provides that really interesting feel to it that no other of these amplifier gives. And not only that, it is extremely detailed. Any of the song, you can hear the small little things. It's like ultra balanced headphone. And because of its blackness, I think it separates the thing very well. Everything is just really nice. But you notice that I didn't give it like maximum points in separation, and soundstage is a point of 3, and that's because the soundstage is quite narrow. I noticed that the soundstage was one of the more narrow ones. It's one of the more narrow, literally one of the more narrow ones on the table here. And not only that, it doesn't have much height either. So it is, I would say, as a very small sound on this table itself. So soundstage was quite low score to me. And then vocals itself. Now, as I said, vocals are very important to me, and the A70 Pro just sounds ultra dry. So I didn't really enjoy it. I mean, with Ado's Unravel and with the Brave by YOASOBI, I really don't enjoy the vocals coming out. It's like clinical, dry. It's just like somebody singing onto the mic as dry as it gets. Not enjoyable at all. Don't really enjoy it. And as such, my enjoyment for it is quite low. Now, the bass is a 3, and that's because A70 Pro has a lot of control, but it doesn't have much bass impact, bass quantity, and not much sub bass either. And the texture is not a lot in those regions too. So that's something how I feel about the A70 Pro. Now, that is, of course, second last place. Now, in the next place is a tie between the, I would say, as the MKH 200 and the Ferrum OOR. Both of them scored 34 points to me, but they scored in different parameters. So I'll talk about the Ferrum first. The Ferrum has absolute good details of 5. Now, I would say as the details compared to the A70 Pro, you can probably hear the details slightly better in the Ferrum. I think partially because a lot of these detail hides in the treble, in the softer treble region. The Ferrum seems more obvious, but details are details and it's always there. Separation and positioning of the Ferrum is actually really, really good. But because I'm going for a 1 to 5 and no 4.5 in between, I'm going to just give it a 4 point because it doesn't deserve a 5 because somebody else deserves a 5. And then for vocals, it is very enjoyable when the singing starts in the Brave or Ado, especially Ado's starting of the Unravel. It was really airy, sounds relatively magical to me. And with the Susvara, it actually sounds quite big too. I really enjoy it. And it has good soundstage. It doesn't have very wide. In fact, the wideness is just slightly more than A70 Pro, but it has the height. And it does make the whole sound like a big bubble in front. Very enjoyable soundstage, and I love it a lot. Tonality is spot on, super accurate. I love it. When I listen to Ultima, everything sounds right. Just really right. And then the bass is great. It has good quantity, good control, some texture, and it's very enjoyable. Now, effortlessness, I will rate it as 4. It does drive the Susvara very effortlessly, but it doesn't deserve a 5 because it doesn't sound the most powerful amplifier on the Susvara itself. So overall, I give it a 34 points, and I think it deserves it. It may score 1 or 2 points more, dependent on which parameter I want to focus more, and whether am I willing to up the point because of certain song type. But at least with these 3 songs, it got a 34 points. Now, let's talk about the MKH 200, which is a tube amplifier. Now, in terms of details, it's a 4 because there is some details that get lost at times. Ferrum and the A70 Pro is just like super ultra balanced. Well, this guy has a little bit more on the mids that are more, I'll say, as obvious, more forward, slightly forward. But it does mean that the details get sometimes a little bit lost, but it's a little bit only. So I give you a detail of 4. Now, I will not explain too much on it because, well, the best part of the MH200 was the soundstage. It is wide soundstage. However, it still scored only a 4 soundstage because it doesn't have the depth nor the height. So it's a very interesting. MH200 sounds like this. A flat white plane where the song just goes left and right, maybe up and down just slightly, but mainly left and right. Even the A70 Pro goes up and down slightly. The Ferrum goes up and down significantly, but, well, the MHA just goes left and right, but wide on the left and right itself. Vocals are 5 because the vocals on the MH200 is just sweet. It is not only just airy, it is very enjoyable, and it is smooth, and yet it doesn't lose quality. And most importantly, it has a touch of warmness in there that just makes vocals attractive. So I give it a 5 for vocals. It is like the most enjoyable vocals out there. And then lastly is the enjoyment of 5 because, well, I'm mainly a vocal listener. I'm biased to any songs that are heavy in vocals, like from Ado and from YOASOBI. So 5 for enjoyment. It scored a 34. Now, if I was not into this type of genre, I think the MHA actually scores lower than the Ferrum OOR stack, purely from the scoring perspective, because I have a very unique requirements of enjoying vocals, especially female Japanese vocals. And the airiness, the smoothness, yet slight emphasis on it is what I want, and the MH200 is perfect for me. So, if you ask a separate and different reviewer, most likely I think the MH200 may lose a point or 2. And that's because it depends on the genre of song you listen to. So I like the Ferrum, which can actually score higher because it's so technically competent, but it's not as enjoyable to me. The MH200 depends. If it is enjoyable to you, you will get the same score. But if it's not enjoyable to you, it may drop slightly. Now, who scored the highest? Obviously, is that small little guy. This is the Emblem 23. The full one is HPA 23RM. This guy only produced 1 watt of power, but it is current mode. Very different from any amplifier on the table, and it is single-ended, but it is fantastic. I want to share with you the scoring of it. So if you look at the scoring on the screen here, it has a detail of only 4, but it has fantastic separation and positioning. Literally, you can hear all the sound in different positions of the soundstage, and coupled with a big soundstage. It is like MHA 200. It has a very wide soundstage, but it also has height and it has layers. Now, the height-wise, it is less than a Ferrum, slightly more than an A70 Pro. So, I'll say it doesn't have that kind of height that much. But it is wide and it has layers. It feels like there is some slight forward and backward to it. Like in Ultima, there was this part with the bells. So the bells do play a different position, but I feel like the bells are moving. It's a very interesting effect, only heard on the HPA 23RM. So I give the soundstage and the separation and positioning 5 to the Emblem itself. And the other one I want to give it 5, I want to highlight is the effortlessness. Now, all other M's here score 4 or 3. Emblem scored a 5 because the rest feels like they are powering the headphone without effort or barely making the requirements of it. The Emblem feels like it's pulling the Susvara along. It is extremely powerful sounding throughout. And that is really important, especially in Ado's song where she screams. It feels like the sound is being projected at your face. With all the bass, everything projected at your face. It's just so good. And when the bass, bass actually scored a 5 for the Emblem because when the Brave plays, there's a lot of parts with very fast hitting bass. It feels like the bass hits and then you can feel a bit of rumble and sub bass. You can feel it on your body. Very magical to me. So it scored a 5 for bass, 5 for effortlessness. However, enjoyment is 4. Once again, personal bias. I enjoy vocals the most. The vocals are very powerful, but it doesn't feel airy. It feels like just enough air, but you know, it doesn't feel like magical. And the lack of magicalness is what I'll deduct points for, enjoyment for, focus for, because it's just very powerful vocals. If I listen to Ado song, nothing but Ado song, yes, I will enjoy it. But once I start listening to YOASOBI, which is more on a smooth Japanese anime girl singing type of feel, then it's not that magical. And then when I hear Ultima chanting, not as magical either also. But it's very powerful, very accurate, very clean. So I deduct 1 point for airiness. And that is why the vocals are 4 and the overall enjoyment is 4. But that makes the Emblem score the highest at 36 points. And if you ask me from the perspective of driving the Susvara, the Emblem, considering that it's battery powered, what more do you want? Magical itself. This is magic for planar magnetics headphone. Now, to be fair, this is a current amplifier, so it is definitely great for planars. And with the Susvara, it sounds really, really good. I have no complaints, and maybe you should try it out yourself. Now, with all the points, I can just once again list out the 5 amplifiers and their overall points. Just note that this is based on my preference, so take it with a pinch of salt and go and try it yourself if you can. Or if not, read more reviews. Because my preference is not your preference. I tell you, I'm heavy preference to vocals. So really ask yourself, what do you listen, what do you enjoy, and therefore buy the amplifier that fits your needs. Now, to be really fair, the A70 Pro is perfect in many ways. If you are into that kind of sound signature, clinical, sterile, you just want very clean, accurate sound, A70 Pro may make it, and you may enjoy it very well. It's also airy, not that bad. Just dry, right? So overall, this is my review of Susvara versus amplifiers. I hope you learned something from it and enjoyed this short little video. If you have any comments, write down below. If you want to know exact description of any of the amplifiers here, or you want me to compare with other amplifiers, do tell me. I have a Burson 3X GT 2023 edition coming in with the silent power supply, and I will keep you guys updated on Susvara versus amplifier in the future. For now, I'll see you again. Bye-bye.